Shut up.
And
Brian.
welcome to the Draft Indy podcast. We have a very full house tonight. Every member of Draft Indy except for Brent and Ollie is here. So going from my left to right, we've got Alex, Brian, Garrett, and Jay. Jay apparently doesn't hate everyone this week. Here we are. And we have a special guest, Colts Twitter darling, Jeremy Stevenson. How you doing tonight, Jeremy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Good. So you kind of took the Colts Twitter by storm when you came onto the scene, like I'd say 2 years ago. You know, I think you're everyone's favorite Canadian. Even had was it Doyle who did a story on you?
Yeah.
I remember that.
I think he actually used me to just make himself look a little better to the Colts crowd. So that's
that was his first night or his first off season or something on that. So he's his stuff is on and off. He's just a different voice, I guess, than we've had previously in the past when it comes to the draft or the Colts media. But we're not going to talk about them tonight. So we had previously Adan, who is from Canada. But how does one become a Colts fan in Canada?
Well, I'm pretty sure the NFL programmed us to do it. There was no NFL in Canada actually around when Peyton was drafted, and he sort of became the face of the company here and probably in the States too. So I'm pretty sure most Canadians are probably casual Colts fans. Just because Peyton was all we saw for about 5 years.
Wait, so Colts Nation is a real thing?
Yeah, I think
Wow.
so.
We got
It didn't hurt that they were winning 11, 12 games every year or anything like that.
That's also true. So, how did you go from kind of a casual Colts fan to being a draft enthusiast as you are now?
I first started paying attention to the draft probably right around when they released Peyton because I realized this is a terrible team and it's a really bad roster and that they're not going to be able to rely on Peyton any longer. So I'd say 2012 was probably the first time that I started creating a big board and learning some prospects' names and stuff like that.
So that's kind of how I wanted to start tonight. Kind of going off that, just how I wanted to start tonight. So you've already evaluated like how many prospects are on your big board?
324.
Oh my God.
So when do you start your evaluation process?
Pretty casually during college season, I'll start looking at guys. I'll just watch a game, and if a guy stands out, I'll have a look at it if he's a senior or if they think he's gonna come out early. Best example of that would be like Reggie Ragland. I just remember watching one of their games, and he stood out on a couple of plays. So then you look him up, and you find out he's a senior, and that people early on had him going, early first round. He's dropped a little bit since then, but so throughout the fall, it's a pretty slow time for me for work usually, so I can usually spend a little bit of time watching games and evaluating some people.
So do you now? I know you got a big board, so you rank them in a certain way. So do you have a grading system? I'm not going to ask you to get into that, but do you have a grading system, or you just kind of slot people in how you think they land on your board, or?
I have no grading system at all. To be honest, it's for me, it's just if I'm sitting at that position, who am I drafting? If I have a bare roster and trying to give equal value to all positions, otherwise you're just going to end up with quarterbacks at the top of your draft. But for the most part, I'll just start putting names on a list and then think about which one I'd prefer to take at that particular time.
Okay. I'm gonna open it up to some of the other guys here. So, do you guys, any one of you guys, have a legitimate laid down system for grading draft prospects, or do you guys just kind of watch and slot?
Watch and slot.
Yeah.
Just kind of
Definitely.
the way I do it. I try to watch 3 games at least per person before I actually put a grade on. I don't even really call it. I try not to call it a grade. I try to call it a value. because I'm not actually assigning a grade. I'm just saying if they were at this spot, would I be happy with the pick, yes or no? And I try to just rank them like that.
Jeremy, I like the way that you put it when you said you were ranking them, because you're thinking of it as a bare roster. Because if you are just trying to rank them 1 through 320, like, it's going to be tough because Colts, they're not going to need a quarterback, so you want to put a quarterback on there. But like, if you were to think, okay, I have a bare roster and like I have just the best player, like, who am I going to take? I think that's a good philosophy to take with it.
For sure. And if you were going to make a big board, Colts specific, a lot of guys are going to drop because they don't fit the scheme, or it's a position that they have no need of whatsoever. But that's kind of the nice thing about just kind of having a blank big board that you can create, is it doesn't matter what kind of scheme it is. It's just all based on talent.
Now, Alex, I know you've watched something like 200 some prospects.
220 right now.
So now, what about you? Do you have like a system for grading, or are you kind of just a slot-in type person?
So I tried to have a grading system in my first draft, which was 2014. But the problem with that, what I struggled with at least, was keeping a consistent scale essentially for each position, because in each position you're valuing different things, and I found it hard to know which, like when you're weighing each of them independently, how to formulate that into a grade that you compare across positions. So I feel pretty comfortable giving grades within a position, but interposition, it's kind of hard. So right now I'm just slotting. I think it's, like everybody said, it's a lot more effective to just think, if I'm here, who am I picking, rather than, this number, because sometimes your numbers are going to lie, and you're like, I would rather have this guy even if he has a slightly lower grade.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as everyone else. I've sat down to try and develop a ranking system, and then I realized I'm not trying to write a draft guide. I'm not trying to get hired by a team to be a scout. I'm just doing this for fun. There's no need for me to sit down and, look at, when I look at a wide receiver, I mean, I'm watching things like footwork and hands and concentration and route running and stuff, but I'm not going to sit there and try and give it a 1 through 10 score or anything like that. It just, at that point, it becomes, the process becomes too, too much, at that point. It's just, where's the fun? Like, you kind of lose the fun at
Trying
that point.
to consistently quantify intangibles that you can't, that are just talents and skills, is something that people try to do, and that gets you in trouble.
Character 8.5 out of 10.
Yeah, and I think someone said character is the worst. I mean, I don't know if someone said that, but in my opinion, character is the worst one. You read draft guides and stuff like that, and again, this is my big thing when it comes to the character conversation, especially with draft Twitter, Colts Twitter, and all that kind of stuff. You don't know this person. All you have is media reports. Now, you can assume that someone who's been arrested for domestic violence is not a very good person, someone that you really don't want on your team. That's just kind of a bare, a starting point, honestly. But when it comes to like leadership qualities and all that kind of stuff, I mean, honestly, just because someone's a team captain doesn't mean they have leadership qualities, because you have managers and companies that are awful at leadership. They just happen to be a manager, right? So I mean, there's all those sorts of things that it's hard to quantify, and it really just kind of leads to a really stuffy process. And again, we've said it multiple times, all you have is the tape, and that's where you got to start.
I feel
and that's where you finish.
Yeah, I feel that way about, I know this doesn't have anything to do with the Colts, but Connor Cook, who people say, he wasn't a captain. Well, how are you going to quantify that? Because Connor Cook has a tremendous record at Michigan State, and he's shown up in the biggest of moments against tough teams like Ohio State, Penn State when they were good, teams like Wisconsin. So are you going to quantify more that he wasn't a captain, or that he had a lot of comeback victories and led his team to success?
And that's kind of where, that's another question I wanted to get into with Jeremy, is like, at this point, like where we're at right now, like this is like information overload, smoke screen time of the year. Like, do you think at this point that people like sometimes will either do too much evaluation or over evaluation, and like you'll see guys who were universally lauded as top 10 picks, top 15 picks. Now they're like, oh no, that's a second rounder. Like why do you think that happens?
A big part of it would probably have to do with the fact that people are actually starting to watch film at this point, whereas before a lot of narratives were just being driven by media. They could be driven by the school. They went to Alabama, so automatically they're going to get a first-round grade, only to realize, they got a couple of defensive linemen who are, great run stuffers, but that's pretty much it, and all of a sudden everyone realizes that that's probably not a first-round grade. There's a ton of information out there right now. A lot of it is bogus, but some of it is good stuff. One of my favorite articles was by Zach Whitman. He did the position-based value drafting.
That's really
the amount of time investment that he put into that was probably crazy. But it's one of my favorites in terms of looking at taking an O-line in the first round and versus a defensive lineman and what your likelihood of success is and that sort of thing. Arif Hassan, am I saying his name right? Arif Hassan, something like that.
I think
so.
our part.
That was actually probably my biggest concern going on a podcast was I realized I've never said any of these guys' names out loud. So,
don't worry about it.
Probably 90% of the prospects I'll screw up their names, but that's all right.
They're not listening.
That's true. He wrote an article on linebackers, kind of trying to predict their expected value based on what round they're supposed to get drafted in. And it was good for me because it confirmed a lot of guys that maybe I didn't think would be a great pick in the third round, but maybe in the fifth. So metrics and analytics has gone pretty far over the past couple of years, especially this time of year. But for me, the more the merrier because it gives me something to read, gives me something to either confirm what I saw on film or make me go back and reevaluate a guy.
Okay.
Yeah, to jump in here real quick on the people moving up and down the boards, it happens a lot. If you pay attention, you'll notice it's usually guys that have a lot of production in college, and then after a couple months, people really start actually looking at them and realize that they're not that good. For Colts fans especially, we know this one. Bjorn Werner was talked about as a top 5 pick in January of the year that he got drafted, and then he tested, and then people actually paid attention and stopped looking at the highlights and realized that at best he was like a late first rounder, and then wasn't even worth that in the end. But
box score scouting.
Yeah, big school, big production.
Exactly.
Yeah, and box score scouting, sometimes it's okay to look at the box score and look, but then if what you're seeing doesn't match, then that's when you know that there's an issue, and that's I think what you guys are kind of getting at there is that's when people start to fall down. Like, this one's interesting for me, and this is not someone that I'm ever going to advocate the Colts draft, but like Laquan Treadwell, like he was a top 5 pick in this class in January, and then he tested slow. People started looking at him, and now some people are saying he falls out of the first round. But then again, like you look at him, but what I see, I still see a guy that can get open whenever he wants, basically. He may not be the fastest guy, but the fastest guy might not be able to jump super high. I don't, whatever. But at the same time, his separation and his technique are what drive him above. And sometimes people start to overevaluate that stuff. And then a lack of production also. Mackenzie Alexander, I know there's varying takes on him in this group. But people look at him and you say, oh, 0 interceptions. There's obviously an issue there. But again, in my perspective, you watch the tape. A, they're not targeting very much, and B, he's got them covered like a blanket. Sometimes it's pretty impressive in my opinion. He's able to stay hip to hip and move and shadow and cover. But then again, he's fallen because he didn't have a single interception. But at the same time, the lack of opportunity has been real. Real quick before I move on to the next question, we've talked about Mackenzie Alexander a lot on here. Jeremy, what's your okay? Go ahead.
Interject. I just think it's interesting that we get to this point in the process and we have these high draft, formerly highly rated picks like Treadwell and Alexander, and suddenly people start to notice that there's like an aspect of them as prospects that that doesn't really fall in line with what they see. Like for Alexander, it's his production, and for Treadwell, it's his combine. So it just kind of but I feel like if you already know where your values are going into the process, that shouldn't be a big deterrent to you. And that's the big thing for me is I get frustrated when I think people don't know what they're looking for when they go into the process.
Yeah.
Or they go in looking for something that would change their process to begin with. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like they're looking for something bad. Like if you're looking for, I've heard Mackenzie Alexander can't do this, or I've heard Laquan Treadwell can't do this. Well, if you hear that before you go and watch him, well, your psychology is that you're going to notice that more and you're going to value that more than you should.
Or you say, you're like, oh man, this guy's really good. This guy's really good. You know, turn on this guy's tape. It's very impressive. And the first game you watch is a total dud, right?
Mm-hmm.
That halo bias is so real. You know, halo bias is your first impression stays with you whether good or bad, and so sometimes it can be.
And Draft Breakdown is a huge influencer on that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, because we can't pick the games that they put on Draft Breakdown, and Draft Breakdown puts up what's available to them. But at the same time, like, you know, that guy's best game might never show up on Draft Breakdown, and his worst, like 3 of his 5 worst games, show up on there.
Or just one, and it's like the first one they post, and everyone tweets about it, and they move on to some other guy. You know.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Sounds like a subtweet at me.
No. Everybody does that. I mean,
yeah, no, that's kind of a good
games.
That's a good question for Jeremy. Jeremy, is Draft Breakdown one of your main resources, if not there, where else do you go to try and watch film? Do you fill up a DVR? Do you have a tape recorder? I don't know.
No, I pretty much just use the internet. Draft Breakdown's obviously a huge utility for everyone to use, and you can usually tell because, you know, a new game will come out of a certain prospect, and all of a sudden, if it's a great game, all of a sudden everyone's a little higher on them, and if it's a bad game, all of a sudden everyone drops them down. Sometimes I'll just watch full games. I'll find a torrent, or if it's on YouTube or something like that. If it's an Alabama game or Ohio State, because you can get a couple prospects in at once, especially if you're looking at maybe a running back and an O-lineman. You can kind of do both at the same time. Small school guys, I have actually contacted schools before if there was just nothing available on the guide, just to see if they have a game or two, and they're usually more than happy to throw you an all-22 or something like that. And some guys, all you get is, a 10-minute highlight reel on YouTube, which it's not the best utility to grade a guy, but at the same time, when I'm watching a prospect, I mostly want to know what he can do, not necessarily what he can't do. So
I love this guy.
So using a highlight reel, I mean, if it's all you have available, use it. If you're looking for an edge rusher and you can clearly see that he can bend around edge, then great. You didn't need to see a full game of him being out of the play or anything like that.
Yeah, no, that's true. And then, I mean, I think a good example of that for me last year was Jaquiski Tart. There was just a highlight reel of that guy, and you see this missile, this rocket launcher type dude, and then he gets in the NFL, and he's doing the same thing. I mean, he does have his limitations, obviously, but I mean, because he came out of Samford, so I mean, there's not a whole lot of Samford tape out there unless it's Alabama, beating up on him or something like that. But the highlight videos are cool, and sometimes for me, I start there. I'll start with the highlight video if I can, and then I'll move on to the other tapes because, again, what you can do is more important than what you can't do, because what you're drafting players to do is what they can do, not what they can't.
Yeah,
it's like the Josh Norris where he wins thing. I really like that. I've really tried to embrace that last couple of years. Like more focused on what they do well. Like how can you use them instead of coming up with negatives. Like lots of quarterbacks, lots of players can't do certain things, but you just try to game plan around what they can do.
And that's probably why when you look at Josh Norris's board, you see players like Corey Coleman at like number 1 or number 2. Because what does Corey Coleman's tape show you? What can he do? He can be an explosive downfield deep threat who makes some insane plays. So let's switch.
Real quickly before we move on, we've been talking about draft resources. Shout out to Noon Kick. That's a really good. That's
Yeah.
another
I've had to
good
use Noon Kick
resource that
before.
nobody ever talks about, but what I use a lot.
Yeah, no, and what we've talked about it in the infamous Draft Indy direct message, which, by the way, if anyone's listening, it's not as intense as we make it sound. It just blows up my phone sometimes. Like, I'll wake up in the morning and see 90 messages sometimes.
80 of them from me at 3 in the morning.
Yes, 80 of them from James at 3 in the morning. But, you know,
Very
it's...
unhealthy.
We've talked a lot, like we share a lot of those resources, and I mean, there's a lot of YouTube subscribers out there that you can, or channels out there that you can subscribe to that don't show up on Draft Breakdown, that are pretty good, and I can maybe post a list of those with this podcast to those who are listening, because some of them are good. There's one of my favorites posts like old games, so like games from like '96 and stuff like that, so you get to see some like old school guys go at it in college, and that's pretty cool. So let's shift to the Colts. This is a Colts-centered podcast. Mike McGlynn's right behind me. I mean, we got to. So I know this is. I mean, we're so close to the draft. I mean, it is 2 weeks away now, right? Yeah. No, 3 weeks.
2 weeks tomorrow. No.
Yeah, 2 weeks tomorrow. So 15 days. That's. I mean, we're getting there. We've talked about needs over and over and over on this podcast for us. But Jeremy, when you look at the Colts, what would you say their top 3 needs are going into the draft?
Can I say edge rusher 3 times?
Yes.
Yes.
You can.
There's only 2 edges, actually.
That's the correct answer.
I mean, it is this, and they just keep cutting them. Like, not that they had a lot of talent beforehand, but I think there's like literally 3 guys that will realistically make the roster.
Yeah.
And they're all 30 or older.
Yes. No, and I mean that's a serious issue, and we talked about that before. I mean, Trent Cole, Eric Walden, and Robert Mathis are pretty much the only guys probably guaranteed to make the team.
And if I'm not mistaken, they're all free agents after this year, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
they are.
I know Cole's contract is up after this.
So is Robert, and so is Walden, because Walden signed that 4-year deal.
Yeah. That infamous 4-year deal.
Which, okay, so
We know.
in the long scheme of things, that deal wasn't so bad.
Nah. All right. Moving on.
Moving on. So let's talk about edge for a second. So magically, everyone falls for some reason to pick 18. Who would you say those top 3 edges are for the Colts, scheme-wise?
Number 1, I'd say Shaq Lawson. And I really came around on that. I thought he was more of a 4-3 guy. He was a rare instance when the combine actually did change my opinion. He was a lot more explosive than I thought he would be, which got me to go look a little more, because I kind of wrote him off as, he's a first rounder, but he's probably not a guy we're going to look at. But he's a stud against the run. He had something like 12 sacks last year. I think he's the only force player, quote unquote, edge rusher of this draft.
Correct.
And I think he could be used. He's big enough that he could be versatile for the Colts, but I think they could use him at outside linebacker, and I think he could do quite well. Number 2, I would say Noah Spence. He's a big risk. Well, we don't really know. I mean, none of us are really privy to that information. But Grigson's put himself in a position that if the pick is there, he's got to take a chance on it, because he's just ignored it for too long. So now he's going to have to do something to make up for it.
What about that third guy?
Third guy for the Colts, I mean, I don't have a first-round grade on anyone else that I would take in a 3-4. It would probably be Jordan Jenkins.
Yeah.
I've got him down at 49, so I mean, to me that would be waiting until the second round. He's probably not going to be a 15, 16 sack guy, but he's balanced against the run. He's pretty violent. I like to see my outside linebackers be violent and really kind of lunge towards the quarterback, and he seems to do that enough that I think I'd be all right with that.
Thanks for muted, Garrett. What was that?
He's digging in his bag. He's got to
playing
eat.
Yahtzee right now.
Did you guys hear me like crunching on this cereal? What?
Yes.
I don't know what it was. It sounded like you're rolling Yahtzee.
Okay. I really like Jordan Jenkins, and I think I've not made that a secret. I wrote a little thing on him, and I think at that second round, I had slotted him in a mock draft once in the third round. I think after I've looked at it more and more, taking him in the second round, if we don't manage to get anyone in the first round, do it. I think he's awesome. Now, another guy who's interesting for a 3-4 maybe in that second round, and I don't know, I haven't seen your board in a little bit, but do you like Calhoun?
Yeah, I think I've got him 54 right now.
Okay.
So there's some question as to whether or not he can play in a 3-4. I think he can. I think he's athletic enough. He holds up well against the run. I'd like to see a little more pass rush repertoire from him, but for a second round guy, it's probably worth a shot for them.
Now, Jeremy, what do you think about Leonard Floyd? And is he an outside linebacker or is he an inside linebacker to you?
I wish I could answer that question. I would love if he could be an outside linebacker in a 3-4. He showed up at the combine a little heavier, which helped because I think originally he was listed at like 230 or something like that.
Well, I think at the beginning of the season he was 220. But
yeah, it looked like he was playing even lighter than that. He's got one of the best pass rush repertoires of anyone in this draft. He's explosive. I just don't know if he could hold up well enough. Again, maybe that's a risk that Grigson has to take because he's ignored the position for too long, but I'd be terrified to have, a bust in the first round again.
Yeah, well, I've made this point because, he's kind of following the mold that Vic Beasley did last year, where he played all season in the 220s, 230s, bumped up to the 240s, and he still maintained his athleticism. So everything compared to his density was really well because he was still performing at a higher level. He was still performing at a high level at a heavier weight, so it kind of bumped up all of his metrics. But then I'm afraid he's just going to shut it all off. And Floyd's a lot lengthier than Beasley was, just to begin with.
Right.
And he's not as good either in terms of his college production, of course, or his athleticism.
And Beasley had a signified role.
And Beasley was in a significantly better edge class, at least that's what we thought at the time. And so I could easily see Floyd going in the first round just because some team is willing to roll the dice because he's such an appealing, explosive player, and there aren't that many of them at his position in this class. But I don't know if I'd be comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so those are some of the guys at the top. So say we don't take any of those guys, or we just wait till a little bit later. Who would be some of those edge guys that you would really like maybe in the 4th, 5th, or 7th round?
For me, my guy is Matt Judon, or however you pronounce his last name. I just started looking at just highlight reels of him, and he just explodes off the tape. He's got good size. His speed is phenomenal. I'd be willing to take him probably. I'd take a chance on him in the 3rd round, but I prefer him in the 4th round. But based on my grade, he's kind of a fringe 3rd round guy. Beyond that, I don't have a ton of edge guys in that range. Charles Tapper, he's a stay away from me in a 3-4.
Don't you like Yannick from Maryland?
I do. If he fell to the 4th or 5th round, I'd be thrilled. I've got like a fringe 2nd round grade on him. I've seen some guys come around on him. A lot of guys still have him like buried in like the 150 to 200 range on their board, but he's explosive. He had a couple great games in 2014 that against some top talent that I think he can play quite well in an outside linebacker position.
Can you pronounce his last name?
Nope.
Okay.
So overall, how would you compare this edge class to last year's?
It's bad, I think. Especially, and compared to next year's, I think next year's is going to be phenomenal. But this year, I've got two edge guys inside the top 10. My next one is Floyd at 35, and it kind of just drops off from there. There's a couple guys that like have some potential. Probably guys I like more in a 4-3, like Bronson Kaufusi, however you enunciate his last name, from BYU. But I don't think he can play in a 3-4. Yeah, this is a bad class to me.
What about the? I'm gonna butcher this guy's name. Kamalai Correa. Yeah.
The Boise
What about
State guy.
The Boise State guy. Yeah. How do you feel
We
about
should
him?
just go by what school they go to because we can
Yes.
enunciate those a lot better. He's a decent option. I mean, he's gonna go high because of how bad this draft is. He's probably a second round, third round guy. But I mean, like last year, this would be a guy that you'd consider in the fourth, fifth round, and you'd take a shot on him, but you would have no expectation of him starting. Whereas this year, if you're taking a guy in the second round, you kind of expect him to come in and make an impact, not just be like a prospect that you're gonna develop over the next couple of years.
Okay.
I think it's a bad class overall. I don't know about you guys, except obviously with strengths at defensive line and interior O-line.
Mm-hmm.
Which
is
is
kind of a boring class.
Yeah, not a lot of really flashy players at positions like edge or wide receiver, especially. No really athletic tight ends. No really athletic running backs. Although you've got some interesting guys at the top of the class. Inside linebacker are getting a lot of hype, but I don't really see it. What were you about to say, Jay?
I'll say really like a lot of people have said it. Like this class is full of guys that are super boring trench players that are going to be good players for a long time.
Yeah, you just got to embrace that.
Yeah, which that's perfectly fine. Like, and that's why I'm all about just get defensive line, get some interior offensive line, just get the best players that you can, and they'll be contributors, guys that'll contribute for a long time. You're probably not getting stars, but get players that are overall good players that'll lift the rest of the roster that's not that good.
Jeremy, I want to ask you what your opinion is on trading down, because I think we're all pretty much for the trade down, as we see is one of those classes where someone I can get at 18 is someone I can get at 28, 38, and I'm all for those extra day 2 picks.
Yeah, the strength of this class I think definitely is round 2 to 4, even into round 5, because some of these defensive linemen are going to drop down. When you guys sent me kind of a brief description of what you might do tonight, I wrote my ideal pick at 18 would be either Shaq Lawson or Noah Spence, but I think both are going to be gone at that point. So then to me, the ideal pick is trade down. You're not going to get an edge guy, but if you trade down, there's a lot of options at interior O-line that I think they could look at and then go edge, second, third round.
I mean, so realistically, this is one of those classes again where the talent isn't like elite at the top. So if the Colts move back, say, I don't know, let's say Cincinnati wants to move up to take a wide receiver at 18. I think they're pick 22, so they move 24. Up 24. So they move from 24 to 18. What realistically would we be looking at there? A third round pick or a second round pick? What would you say?
They could maybe get creative and swap a third for an extra second or swap a fourth for an extra second. To me, it's not even about getting great value because there's not going to be anyone for them to pick at 18. I don't think. They need a guy that's going to make an impact on day one. There's some great options at cornerback, but with the recent signing of Robinson, is a cornerback going to come in and play day one? I don't think so. As much as I like some of these guys. So to me, if they can get anything to trade back, I'd do it.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think one of the really good trade back from last year was when they moved down into the third, or when they moved from the second round into the third round with Dujon Smith, and then moved up a bunch of spots in the fourth round.
It was okay.
I mean, it was a creative trade, and I mean, there wasn't really anyone there that they really thought they were worth taking, and that way we were able to pick up Gaithers. So
yeah, I'd prefer trade downs. If we're going to be trading down, get an extra pick, not get a slightly better fourth round pick.
But I mean, if we're all team trade down this year, if we don't see a lot of talent at the top of the class, then it's going to be harder to trade down, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Not going to be as many guys that people want.
I'm hoping there's going to be a run on quarterbacks or wide receivers. Like I'm really hoping I'm hoping that Essentially, I'm actually hoping for a fall of quarterbacks. A guy like Paxton or Wentz or Goff falling, so someone will trade up back up to 18 because the rumors are that the Bills at 19 are interested. The Jets could still be interested. So that's kind of a situation I'm looking at where if say Paxton Lynch falls and the Bills may want him, is someone going to trade up to get him at 18? I almost think the Colts are in a prime position for that because I love these rumors that the Bills might want a quarterback and that they're going to screw over Tyrod Taylor because if he wants to trade up and take Paxton Lynch and trade down with us, they're going to give us great capital for a quarterback just to beat a team to him.
Yeah, in terms of trading down, that's definitely the best case scenario if a guy like Paxton were to fall. But in terms of getting the guy you want at 18, you want those quarterbacks to go early. You want Laquan Treadwell and Coleman and whoever else to go before 18. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, you want them to, you want there to be that mess up at the top. You want that chaos at the top to where, people
root for chaos.
Yeah, root for chaos at the top because if you get three quarterbacks in the top 15, that pushes down 3 guys potentially who would be there that wouldn't normally have been there, and so we're at the spot where either we can get a guy that we really really like, or again trade down and someone who's like, oh, I got to grab this guy since he fell, that maybe we're not so high on. So did you said I know you said your dream pick at 18 would either be Lawson or Spence, but if they're not there, who would it be, Jeremy?
If they're not able to trade?
If they're not able to trade, yeah. If they have to stay at 18, who is it?
Oh, man. I mean, Andrew Billings wouldn't be the worst option. He's probably a day one upgrade at nose tackle. He's a guy that he can play day one, so that's a big thing for me. As much as I love this, the cornerbacks early on, I don't really want to see a guy sit on the bench for half the year until someone gets an injury. Beyond that, I'd probably be looking at D-line, and I'm thinking Chris Jones probably. He's a monster. Vernon Butler wouldn't be the worst option. Beyond that, we're all just hoping that it's anything beyond Reggie Ragland, and I'm probably going to be super disappointed, but that's all right.
Ragland is kind of the baseline for me for the first round pick.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be okay with it, not ideal.
I just assume it's going to be Conklin, and anything beyond that will be better.
That's a good question. Are there any of those tackles in that range that you're interested in at all?
Not unless he's playing guard. I don't want any tackles.
Okay. So would you be okay with Whitehair at 18?
I think so. I mean, he played left tackle, but there's no way he's playing left tackle in the NFL. He's probably playing guard if you can, if you could slot him in at right guard on day one. I know some teams even worked him out at center, which we might have a need there as well. So that wouldn't be the worst option.
I know Matt Miller had him in his preliminary center rankings. He had him as his center.
Can I get a quick rundown of the center class from you guys? Because there are a lot of names, and I'm not sure which ones I'm supposed to like.
Okay.
You like a lot of them, is what you should.
I got it, man. Ryan Kelly.
Ryan Kelly.
I know. I glanced at his mock draftable chart, so of course I like Ryan Kelly.
Austin Blythe.
The Iowa guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Evan Bowen from Missouri. Kyle Friend from Temple.
He's everyone's favorite 7th round pick, Kyle Friend from Temple.
He's not going 7th round, though. He's going to go better than that.
I know. That's how I know.
Max Turk from USC. I think.
I pronounce it twerk.
But I think something he missed part of this year. I can't remember if it was an injury, but I know there's a lot of people that like him for like his movement, and they say he's like the best puller in this class. But I think he's a day 3 center at this point. But a lot of people like him.
He's really interesting to me because he's 6'5" at center. Yeah. That's crazy.
And then one of the Matthews sons on Texas A&M is a center too.
Yeah. He's not good. I don't like him.
Okay.
Family tradition.
And I know the Colts worked out the other guy, the guard at Missouri, McGovern. They worked him out at center at his pro day or whatever. They had video of him working out at center.
One guy you guys haven't said, but Nick Martin is probably the best scheme. Like, if we're truly moving to the zone blocking scheme,
we are.
He's probably the best at zone blocking scheme.
Jay, I heard you say him.
Yeah, I said him. Come
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't hear it. You guys were just started shouting out names. Brian's trying to talk over everybody else, so it's just like, man, who we got? I mean, there's so
And then
many.
I don't know if Swim Malo, or however you say his name,
Oh,
from Oregon State, if he's a guard or a center, but he's a guy I really like.
good job, Alex. Throw him in there too.
Either.
He could play center, I bet.
So we've got deep classes at defensive line and interior O-line, and both are kind of needs for us, and it would be great. The thing is, though, my philosophy differs on them because I'm of the opinion that you would wait to get an offensive lineman in a deep class, but you would want to maximize that defensive line talent. So even though it's a deep class, you would want that elite athlete, that Chris Jones or Sheldon Rankins, if you can get him in the first or second round.
Yeah, Rankins is my is one of my top three like realistic dream picks. Is Rankins, Hargraves. I still think he might fall.
You got dream picks and then realistic dream picks? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean dream picks. I guess if Tunsil fell, I'd take Tunsil. If Ezekiel Elliott fell, I'd take Elliott. But that's not going to happen. So realistically, you're looking at like Hargraves, Rankins, and Spencer Lawson, whichever one falls.
Now, we were talking about that 18 spot, Jeremy. Ryan Kelly, if he's there at 18, is that cool with you too?
I wouldn't be too mad. I'd sit there super disappointed because I think you could have traded back, 10, 15 spots and got an interior O-line of similar talent, or possibly even him. But he's going to fill a need day one. Hopefully the center position is finally taken care of after 4 years of just misery.
AQ Shipley was there.
Yeah,
right?
but it was evident that they were never going to let him stay and start. We don't like keeping the good guys like Reitz, Wrights or whatever. We like to put them on the bench instead.
Yeah, with Shipley, that was just such an interesting case, and that's the Medellin Grigson got in on that one, right? All the Chuck Stay guys are that Grigson. We had AQ Shipley starting at center and got benched. I don't
Make
know.
center great again. Build a wall. Literally build a wall and make center.
Wait, I remember we had all these stats for the offense. We had all these stats for like when AQ Shipley was starting versus everyone else. It was like some NBA stuff. It was crazy. I loved it.
His plus minus.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a little about some of the later round guys when you're talking about edge, but who's your favorite sleeper in this class?
It's tough. How deep are we going? It seems on Twitter now, maybe it's just the guys that I've started following, but it's become the sexy thing to find the sleeper and throw them in the third, fourth round now. So a guy like Matt Judon, I thought nobody knew who he was, and now all of a sudden I'm seeing mocked in the third round. So it's getting a little trickier. You see Javon Hargrave, his name's thrown around a lot, and I think he's going to end up going in the second round now. So that's not too much of a sleeper anymore. Probably one of my favorite ones, and I guess he's getting a little bit of hype now, is Justin Zimmer out of Ferris State. This guy's like a freak athlete. He's over 300 pounds. He ran a 4.85 40. He did 44 reps on the bench press, which that's insane. Even at a pro day, you can't fake that. The weight is the weight, so that's pretty impressive. I had a look at the Spark score today just to see how high he was, and he was top out of all defensive linemen. There was about 120 of them or something like that. He fell in like the 98th percentile of defensive linemen in the NFL. The guy's just a freak. And the only reason I don't know if you guys remember, I posted a Vine of him a couple months ago where he hurdled over the running back and then finished the play for a sack. And I thought he was like a 260-pound guy, so I was like, oh, that's pretty impressive. I'll have a look at this guy. And then I actually got tweeted at by his mom and his dad. Apparently they're his biggest fans. And it let me know that he was actually playing at like 290, 295 at that point. So that actually got my attention a lot more because, I'm half that size, but there's no way it's easy to get over top of a running back at 295 pounds. And the guy's got incredible speed. 4.85 at 300 pounds. That's almost unheard of.
Can you say his name again?
It's Justin Zimmer. He's from
Justin
Ferris State.
Ferris
Yeah.
State.
Yeah, Ferris
As
State.
in,
I saw
like
Josh
Bueller.
tweet something about him today.
What's that?
Garrett, yeah, from like Ferris, Ferris.
No, he was asking about you said.
Oh, I didn't know who he was asking, but no, I saw Josh. I can't remember he was meeting with someone, but I heard something about it. But from like what I hear, he kind of sounds like Davis Tull from Tennessee, Chattanooga.
Yeah.
I don't know. Listening to you describe it and talking about the spark score, I can promise you he's going to the Seahawks to play offensive line.
And they're going to tweet about it for months.
And we're going to hear about
going
it
to
for
suck.
months. Yeah.
Oh,
And
yes.
he's going to suck.
Oh man. What can you give me your? Okay, here's a good question for you. I've got my candidate for the best name in the NFL draft this year. Who's your? If you got the number one pick, if you got the number one pick on picking the all-name team, who is it?
Oh, you're gonna make me look through the list a little bit now. I mean, from Stanford, there's a guy named Aziz Shitu. That's a pretty good name. That's a pretty solid name. Every time I see his jersey, I think that's got to be a fake jersey. There's no way that's really his name.
His nickname is Shatru.
That's a nickname.
Who else you got?
This isn't. I feel like this isn't a great all-named class.
They just
There's
got
another
some really
guy.
difficult ones.
I just did one for my mock draft today.
Yeah.
Silverberry Muhan.
What?
Yes.
Silverberry is his first name.
Cincinnati Bearcat.
Yep.
Oh,
Sleeper.
Willie Beavers out of Western Michigan. That's a pretty solid name. I hope he gets drafted just so someone has to say Willie Beavers on stage and not crack a smile or anything like that.
I got one really quickly from TCU. There's an offensive tackle that I have no chance of getting the name right. Halapulivati Vatai?
Where does the first name end and the last name begin on that one?
The V. The V is the last name.
Okay.
It's something else.
man, those Polynesians can really name their guys.
There's no really like top end guys this year, like Star Latulele, like that. Like I think we took that for granted.
Hold
How
on.
often we've had great names
Yeah.
in the first round.
Jake Butt went back to school, so.
I know, man.
Oh.
I cannot wait for Jake Butt. He's a first rounder too, probably.
Yeah, he's good.
Like,
That's the
I
best
can't
thing.
wait for him to. Goodell's gonna be like, Jake Butt, and everyone's gonna laugh. Like,
And he plays tight end.
yeah. Jake Butt plays tight end, which is hilarious.
That's what it says. His Twitter bio just says that too. His Twitter bio says, "My name is Butt and I play tight end."
Excellent. Okay. Two more things tonight and we'll wrap it up. It's been getting close to an hour here. So give me a hot take for the draft in regards to the Colts. Something they might do or something, or a hot take that you've heard someone else say or something like that. Just give me a hot take. Throw it at me.
How about a hot take that the Colts don't need a right tackle in the first round?
I don't think that's a hot take.
Apparently,
Hot take if you read mock drafts.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
I saw an article earlier. Someone posted it that Mike Sando suggested that the Colts should trade for Joe Thomas
Oh my god.
during the draft, so we could have two left tackles, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean Jack Moore needs to move back to guard because he plays right tackle full time.
Exactly.
Hold on. We've never addressed this. Does Brian pronounce it Muhort?
Muhort.
I swear
Muhort.
you said Muhort. I'm gonna rewind it back and listen tonight.
I hate it. I mean, I feel like I've tried tweeting at people and I've given up caring, but so my favorite one was I think it was I can't remember. It was one of the ESPN guys who don't know what they're talking about, but they were like, "Oh yeah, the Colts leave the first round without a right tackle, then Grigson deserves an F in the draft," and it's just like, what? Like really? And he was like, and then the Colts should trade up to get Conklin.
That was Casserly.
Castle.
Who was it? Who was
So
it that
info
gave
account.
Who's the one that writes for the Texans that gave the Colts an F a free agency grade and then gave the Texans an A because they got Osweiler?
John McClane.
Oh yeah.
The homerist of all homers.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. John McClane, he's such a homer that it doesn't matter. Which that leads me to the last thing I wanted to talk about. We had a reader. I like this question that we got from during our reader podcast, the Reader Mail podcast. Who do you want the divisional teams to take? Jeremy, I think that's a good question. If we're hoping that they draft poorly, who are you hoping that Houston, Jacksonville? So Jacksonville's probably, or even Tennessee, since they're right up there at the top. Who are you hoping that they draft that's just not a good spot for them, or not really what they need, or something like that?
I mean, my biggest hope for Titans is that they don't find a trade partner and that they're stuck in that number one spot. Because I think they could end up with an RG3 type, recoup from trading out of that spot. Because really, I mean, they're going to have to take Tunzel if they stay at number one, I think, which to me is ideal. I mean, he's a great player, but he's a tackle. He's not going to be a game changer. And that roster is just it's such a bare roster that they would do so well by getting an extra couple, second-round picks, maybe first-round pick next year. So for them, ideally, just sit exactly where they are and do the dumb thing and take Tunzel.
Yeah, Jeremy, I made the point that I hope they take a tackle because Colts don't have any good pass rushers, so it doesn't matter. They have good O-line. Colts aren't going to – I hope they take Tunzel over Ramsey.
What about Jacksonville?
I mean, it's tough to say I don't care with Jacksonville, but I'd prefer if they stuck with someone on D-line. They were actually starting to put together some impressive pieces on offense, and they're a Josh Doxson away from potentially being explosive. I really hope that nobody in the South ends up with Ezekiel Elliott. As much as I hate drafting a running back in the first round, I would hate it even more if one of our rivals did it. So. Ideally he ends up on the Giants or on the Cowboys or something like that, and we don't have to deal with him.
Yeah, and then Houston, hopefully they take another linebacker or something like that.
Jack Conklin is I'm team Jack Conklin to the
They
Texans.
reportedly like Braxton Miller a lot. If he doesn't develop into anything, that's certainly a reach, and from what we know now, that's totally a reach.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, the nightmare to them would be if they actually get a decent wide receiver to put beside DeAndre Hopkins, and then all of a sudden we've got some problems with them because they might actually have a real quarterback now. The years of just relying on no quarterbacks in the AFC South might be coming to an end. So, ideally they don't get a decent wide receiver 2 out of this draft.
Now, do you think the Colts are still the team to beat in the AFC South?
To me, if you have a healthy Andrew Luck, yes, you're the team to beat until you're beaten. The only time they've been dethroned so far, he hasn't even been on the field. We've been relying on half of a Matt Hasselbeck, who was halfway to retirement and halfway in the hospital. And we still won 8 games.
We were beating AFC South teams with Hasselbeck. That was the hilarious thing.
I'd say half of a Hasselbeck is pretty generous. Seems like a lot less of him out there.
He left at least half on the field. There was part of him out there.
Yeah, that was tough to watch.
It was.
That's why I didn't watch it.
Side note, before we wrap up, I wanted to point out, look at me and Jeremy with our clean parts and our combed hair, and you guys, not a one of you has your hair combed.
What's a comb?
Me and Jeremy rocking a nice, clean, professional Twitter parts, and you guys are just rolling out of bed.
Okay, tell you what, Jay, get some real headphones and then come talk to me.
Oh
my God.
These came free with my phone.
Hey,
I'm just doing my best to play the dad role.
They came free with my phone 6 years ago.
That is true, Jeremy. We're rocking Dad Twitter. That's right.
Dad Twitter.
I apologize, guys.
It's an important part of Twitter. But on that, let's wrap this up. And again, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming by tonight.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
appreciate it.
No, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. You guys are doing an awesome job. There's a real void in Colts Twitter that you guys are doing a nice job filling. There's been a couple big names that have moved on to bigger, better things, or just different parts of life. But you guys are doing an awesome job. So thank you for having me.
Good, and I hope you come back sometime. Hope we don't scare you off, and we can get you back on here again, maybe next year towards the draft again or in the season. So, On that note,
I think we can say. I just want to make one more point. We can say that we can thank him. We can all thank Jeremy for a majority of the followers from Draft Indy. You've done absolutely wonders.
You know what? I didn't do anything to earn mine, so I feel like at least I can spread the love. And you guys are actually doing some work.
And I know that when you invariably retweet the posts that we make, we will get more followers, and so thank you in advance.
Well, I'll actually review it first and make sure that I look good and that I didn't say anything too dumb. And if it checks all the marks, then I'll be sure to
There
retweet
we
it.
go. That works.
Your handsome rating is very high.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Killing it.
It is. And on that note, we will be back next week, 1 week before the draft, and then we will be doing draft day recap podcasts during the draft. It'll be fun, and we will see you guys next week.